I'm going to take this rust pattern and I'm going to put it on this thing. So I'm going to drag this into here. I'm going to undo the background. Pull out of here. I'm going to make sure this is a not 300. That's weird. It's 100. Let's put it at 72. Come on. And I'm going to shrink this down. I want it to kind of go like that, I think. And then I'm going to go here. I'm going to right click this. That's weird. It wasn't giving me my option. Convert to smart object. Okay. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go up to my edit. Okay, so also what I'm going to do here, I'm going to show you the basic process of this, okay? And what I'm going to expect is what I'm doing here, okay? I'll give you a couple of cars or vehicles. If you want to go find another one, I don't care. And it doesn't have to be a photo. It could be a rendering. Normally, it probably would be a rendering. I'm going to go to edit, and then I'll give you a video of a guy who takes this really far, okay? But it's the exact same process. The only thing I like about that video is he does a plane, so he flips it and does the wings. And then I'll talk about this in a minute. You can create a good thing to do if you're doing a complex object, which he does in the video, is you can create a pattern that has like numbers or something on it. So it's oriented when you switch it, so you know the orientation, okay? For this, I don't really need it. I'm gonna go to distort. I'm gonna pull this up here. And actually, let me go back, because I actually want to see through it. So I'm going to drop down the opacity there. And then I'm going to go back to my edit, transform, distort, and just kind of give it a little bit of perspective. Now with this kind of pattern, it's not really all that important really, but I still like the perspective. You're going to see why in a minute, actually. Okay. So let's say that, I would actually pull this one out a little more. Actually, I am going to pull that out a little more, because it's going to matter as I move through this. So I'm going to follow the perspective of the car. So that's good. Now I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go to my edit. Got to be on that layer. Edit, transform, warp. And what I'm going to start doing, I'm going to give it a grid. And I'm going to start wrapping this around this thing.
How did you give it a grid?
Just right there where it says grid.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do here is just start sort of, I'll do it sort of quickly. Let's see, let's go up here a little bit. And then let's say that's enough for now. I'm going to follow this a little more, maybe this back here a little more. Why it's going. So let's say that's okay. And then what I'm going to do is I want to put a layer mask on this. Switch my stuff, black and white's fine. I always like to make sure it's zeroed out, go black. And then I like to use a softer brush for this. And what I'm going to do here is go in and paint out everywhere I don't want it. So I have to make a decision where all this lives, which I'm just keeping it on the white parts. Does that make sense, you guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and then what happens is when you get this done, I'll do sometimes when I think I've finished it, I'll put it on a bunch of weird overlays that throw weird color, and I'll find all the places I missed or places where I need to paint it back in, right? You know, obviously I need to paint out these windows. I just want to keep the white areas.
Why did you have to convert it to a smart object to do
You're
that?
going to see in a minute.
Oh,
I don't have to. I could just do this like this, but if I want to be able to do, so I would just keep painting this until I got it somewhere that I liked it. Does that make sense? So I'm going to just let go of this because I have one already in the oven. It's been baking. Hopefully, I think I did anyway. If I didn't, I'll have to actually go through it. Okay, so you understand that I'm painting out what I don't want and adjusting it. That's why I use whatever you call it. And I'm going to end up with something like this. Okay. And then I'm going to go, let's find an overlay that works. Okay. And in this case, I might go, it needs to pull back a little bit. So now I've got it wrapped. Does that make sense? Now, the problem with this vehicle that I don't like is there's not a whole lot of value in here. Okay. So I might come in here if I was going to do this, if somebody gave me this, I'd come in here and punch the value a little bit. Okay. But for our purposes, it's fine. Okay. So then I'm going to go. So now I've got a smart object. So you see this little icon on my thumbnail? I can double click that. And here's my original pattern. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go. Now, the way I've heard this described by people, and I'm going to show you a couple other things with it, I think on Monday, is you sort of like you're putting your object in a bag and you're doing all the stuff on the bag. And then when you double click it, you're going into the bag to refine the object that's actually in the bag. Okay. And there's a lot of other uses for this, which I'll talk about a little more later. And I'm going to go over here. And I'm going to go here. And grab this pattern. And then I'm going to go pull this off of here. Pull this into here. Turn it.
Excuse me, Mike.
Yeah.
That particular pattern, you pulled it out of the screen and then you copied it into the...
I tend to
Other
just pull it out of the tab and pull it in. And the reason I do that, if I pull it straight from the desktop, it automatically turns it into a smart object.
Okay.
And in this case, I'm working in a smart object. I don't want to do that. Okay. Or even if I'm just working in general, if I don't want it to be a smart object, when you pull it off the desktop right into Photoshop, it just tends to opens as a smart object. And then I got to right click the bar and go rasterize layer. Okay. Because it won't let me do a lot of things if it's a smart object. Okay. So now I put this pattern here and I'm going to go save. And then I'm going to go back over here and it wrapped it. Okay. So now I can come in here. Now I can close that sub layer and I can go, let's go to another pattern. Okay. So right here, by the way, you can see a spot I missed right there. These two spots. So I'd have to go back into my spot layer or my layer mask and fix that, right? Which I would have done. I would have gone in and got real clean and got this all done. So let's pull this pattern. See, I tend to pull it up here and then just pull it in here. So let's pull this one, I don't know, there. Yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm going to stretch it a little bit. Oops, I screwed up, sorry. Now, what did I do wrong there? I went into my actual layer. I don't want to do that. I want to go to my smart object layer and then do that. There it is. Maybe this one will just blow up as is. Save it. If you don't save it, it doesn't do it. And it just is going to keep keeping that information, and it's going to wrap it. So I only have to do it once. Now you can see the value of this. If I was doing, it doesn't matter. It could be character design, it could be a vehicle, it could be anything. I can go, I've got my render done, and now I can apply 50 different ideas in a half an hour. You know, here's a night shot. Here's a this, here's a that. Here's if you want to go with a very Blade Runner-y look. Here's if you want to go with a bright future-y look. Here's what you want to, and I can just keep generating ideas like that, right? Or like this kind of thing. I like this one. Wait, where is it? Let me get rid of this.
Excuse me, Mike.
Yeah.
Is that something you'll be covering in those classes that you're working on? The not product design, but sketching for what are those classes you said you're gonna be working on?
I have two product design classes. One's a toy design class. One's product design sketching.
Sketching, okay. Okay.
And then I have a sketching class on Saturday that is a sort of teaching how to do this, kind of like that Disney PDF I gave you guys.
Product design. Okay.
Very fast sketching.
Okay.
And then taking that into designing and taking that into stylizing, but all based on initially based on observational. Okay.
Okay.
I'm
All
a
right.
big believer, and I don't think I'm alone in this. I'm a big believer that you better get your observational skills together. Otherwise, forget it.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you
Okay.
want to learn how to draw out of your head, paint out of your head, do all that kind of stuff in design and play and all that stuff. That skill set, that's where it starts. Okay.
Okay.
If you're not in that sketchbook all the time,
All right.
it's not going to happen. Okay.
Right
That's
on.
my
Thank
opinion.
you.
Okay. So I'm going to go double click this again. Shrink this down. Save. Right? Again, you can use this on character. You could use it on certain sections of a character where, you know, where you're just going to do something that's complex. You don't want to keep repainting it. Really handy, fast tool, right? And then I could come in here maybe and go, oh, I have this already pulled down a little bit. So there it is, full strength. You know, I can get all these different things just from the, and also whenever I put a new pattern on here, I'll go through my overlays and see if there's one that works better. Because again, the overlays, usually this is going to work with the same one because it's going on white. Okay. And you really want to, but sometimes I do this and I just get some interesting ideas. Like that's kind of interesting, but I want to make sure that I'm catching that. That's kind of interesting. I mean, I might just generate that as a cool version of it, right? A bluish version of it. And then maybe I'll adjust it. That's kind of nice. I actually kind of like that. I like that one actually. I like that one. These are picking up the values underneath really nice. And even that, it just gives me different color ideas and different, that's kind of interesting. But I've got it on multiply here, which I think the other ones work nicer. Maybe there. Okay, does that make sense? Before we start working on it, we create we convert it to a smart layer, right click and by the way, you right click the bar. Don't right click the thumbnail. Don't right click the word, right click the bar. Drop out menu will come in and say smart object or convert to smart object. Okay. And when you pull something in and you see, and you go, how come I can't work on it? Look and see if that little icon's right there. It's because it converted to a smart object on its own. And you need to do the exact opposite, right? Click the bar and drop down and say rasterize layer, and it'll just turn it into a regular layer. Something I'll talk about on probably on Monday a little bit is like, I don't know if you guys ever noticed, but like if I bring an object in and then I shrink it down, and then later on I go, oh, I want that bigger, it'll pixelate. Okay. If I convert it to a smart object, I can shrink it to this big, shrink it to, and then blow it up to back to its original size. It won't lose anything. Okay. That's a big hassle, because I've had that, because as you're working, you're going, you know, you're readjusting sizes. And once you shrink it down, it shrinks it to that pixel ratio or whatever. And then when you blow it back up, it blurs, right? It pixelates. And then if I shrink it again, then it really pixelates. It's a mess. Okay. If you convert that to a smart object, you know, if you're placing things, it's smart to convert it to a smart object, because you can just keep playing around with it and it doesn't lose quality. Okay. Now another thing here. Okay. That all makes sense, right? And by the way, and then I'm going to give you, again, this is a guy, I was going to make a video of this and I just stumbled on this guy's, and I was like, this is perfect. It's really good. Okay. You can skip the first part of it. He just goes through the basic idea of this. If it helps you, watch it. He just does it on a barrel. He just has a little barrel drawing he does on that. And then he goes in and does a very complex spaceship. And the reason I like that, again, is the spaceship has wings, so he has to flip it. And he talks a little bit about how he uses his orientation pattern to, you can understand what the orientation pattern's for here, right? Yeah? Casey?
What do you mean by orientation pattern?
Okay, so if I'm working on a complex object, okay, this isn't that complex. I know I'm laying it like that. Okay, I kind of know that. So then when I put another pattern over it, I know it follows the same orientation from front to back. Does that make sense? Now, if I'm going in like he's going to do, he has a fuselage and then he has two wings. Okay. So what he does initially is he makes you could do it with anything. It just has an orientation. I think he uses letters. Okay. He puts boxes and letters, right? So then when he puts that on there, it's not that hard with the fuselage, but then when he puts the wing on there, it's going to orientate this way. And he needs to make sure it orientates this way. Okay. So then he's got the orientation pattern in there to go, oh, and then when it flips, he's got to orientate it that way. So if he has some sort of pattern that has like this pattern doesn't really have an orientation. Okay. If I was doing this on a very complex object, it would probably be smart for me to start with a pattern that has an orientation so I could see how it's laying. Does that make sense?
It sounds very similar to like UVs in Maya.
It might be, I don't know. But yeah, you know, if you have some sort of, you know, when you start getting to complex objects, you're going to want to have some sort of now, having said that, it's the same process. I just like that he takes it a lot further, but it's this process. Okay. And then again, we'll go over this on Monday if you have any problems with it. Okay. And all I'm expecting is this. Okay. I'll give you a couple of vehicles. If you want to go out and find another one, I don't care. Or if you have like a really rendered out one. Now, here's the thing with this. If you're going to do this with your own work, you're going to want to render it. Okay. It's got to have some value. Otherwise, it doesn't really make any sense. Okay. So another thing here, let's just do this real quick. And by the way, I can go in there in that sublayer and turn things off, go back to another pattern, right? What I love about it, go ahead.
I just had a quick question. Would you save each of these as individual PSDs, or are you saying in different layers? Like when you
What I would do if I was doing this for a client, I would just either export them or do a save as and just throw them out, and then I'd orientate them in a new document. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but while you're playing, just in the workflow part.
Okay.
You know, when you're showing us different kinds of patterns you could put together.
It's
would you
saved
just keep
as a
them?
PSD anyway. Yeah.
No, but like, let's say you did that one version where you had it like white and it was blue and you wanted to look at that. But you wanted to keep it as a choice option. And then you wanted to do like
all those options are in the sub layer of the smart object.
okay, so you can always just back it up is what you're saying.
I can just turn one of them off and it goes back to the other one.
Okay. Okay.
Like,
So it doesn't,
they're in their own layers in the sub layer, in the smart object layer. And I can just turn one off. I don't like that, turn it off. And then I got the one that was there before. And then I don't like that either. Turn it off. Then I got the first one.
Oh, okay, great. But can I see that? Like, you know how we can see the layers, all the different layers in the
You
screen?
just have to turn it off, save it, and go back to your original file, and it'll show you.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
And then I just export them, orientate them really nicely on one page. Okay, so let's look at this real quick. Now there's certain tool, and I'm just going to tell you this because it's just something that working across platforms, okay, or programs, or what do you want to call it. So I'm going to take this image. This is weird. I put all this together today, and now all of it's disappeared. Hang on a sec. I don't understand how I put all this stuff together and it's completely, oh wait, maybe it's, oh, here it is. I'm going to take this image of Birdie again. And let's say I want to do text on a path, which I can't do in Photoshop. Okay. But normally if I go, let's see what I got here. I'm going to open up Illustrator. Okay. And it's got to open because my computer was shut down. And then I want to go through one more thing. Okay. Which is real quick. Someday this will open. There it is. And let's say I'm going to take my Birdie image. And I'm just putting it in here for scale so I can see the scale, right? Does that make sense? I'm going to lock this layer, or I want to get rid of this one. I want to make a new layer. Oops. Let me just do new layer. I'm going to put type. Because, you know, there's things, and it could just be a drawing thing that I do here. You know, there's all these tools in Illustrator I can't use, that aren't in Photoshop, okay? So let's say I go, and let's save this. Come on. Let's go. I don't think you can do this in Photoshop. And let's say I want to do text on a path. I don't know why they don't have the slider anymore. Let's just do this. There. So now I've got, let's change this color. Oh, it's so annoying. Illustrator, hang on. By the way, this Illustrator does this all the time where it gets rid of your swatch palette. So that's where you got to put your workspace, make your workspace. So when it disappears, I can just go reset mic and all my stuff comes back up, just like in Photoshop. And let's make this orange. And we'll save this. I'm going to go. Command C. I'm going to go to Photoshop. Now, look, it's going. Now, you've noticed this probably when you paste an object into Photoshop. It'll ask you if you want to do it as pixels, or it's a lot of times it defaults to smart object. And I'm going to say, yeah, smart object. I'm going to put this up here. Oh, where did, get out of here. There it goes. I don't know what this came up for. And I'm going to save it. Now, if I want to go here and change this, I can just click my smart object. It's going to open up Illustrator. I'm going to make my changes. This library thing keeps coming up. And it should. Oh, I think I opened the wrong file. Hang on. Yeah. Let's change this. That's weird. It didn't change it. Hang on. It keeps going. Oh, that's why. Okay, so it opened up in my sub layer just like it always does, and I didn't do it from there. That's why. So I got to do it from here. And there it changed it. Okay, so it's the same process. I double click the little smart object. It opens up in Illustrator, and then it changes my, whatever changes I make in Illustrator, it's going to update in Photoshop. Does that make sense? Because you're going to, if you're an Illustrator, there's a good chance that you're going to be working in Photoshop and then creating things in Illustrator and combining them. And this like gives you your workflow. You can also do this in Lightroom. Like if you're working in Lightroom, you can export it right out of Lightroom. There's a button down at the bottom right. You can click it, export a smart object. It opens up in Photoshop as a smart object. You can do what you need to do in Photoshop. When you need to go back and change something back in Lightroom, you double click your smart object, takes you back to Lightroom. Does that make sense? Yeah? Mary,
Thanks.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Mary, why do you look like you're not understanding it?
I understand it. I don't have Illustrator.
You don't have to have Illustrator. I'm not asking you to do anything in Illustrator. All I'm doing is saying you can work across platforms.
Can you turn text into a smart object and do it that way?
Can you what?
Can you turn text into a smart object and do the same thing that you're doing?
Well, there's certain tools in Illustrator that aren't in Photoshop.
Okay.
And also Photoshop or Illustrator is just a different program. So I might want to come in, I do this all the time. I might want to, and I go back and forth. I might make something in Illustrator, then I pull it into Photoshop and I start painting on it to give certain parts of it a little more painterly aspect. Then I might go back to Illustrator and update Illustrator a little bit. I'm going back and forth. It could be, again, it could be Lightroom. I don't know if they do it. They probably do it also with InDesign, I'm assuming. You know, because again, one of the good things about Adobe is that they're all designed to interlock with each other, right? So, and I have this happen all the time where I go in to do something and there's just things I can't do in Photoshop and vice versa. Obviously there's a whole, or Photoshop's a raster based. So this is important, by the way. Photoshop's raster based, right? So Photoshop has a limit, okay? Which is why we usually for print or not, usually for print, we go 300 or above, right? And then there's a limit, right? So like when I did that banner for the restaurant, I did it, I can't remember the size, but let's say I did it 10 by 24 inches. And then I knew it could go up, I think 75% from there at 300. And I could blow that up into a 10-foot banner. But beyond that, it's going to pixelate, okay? When I'm creating something in Illustrator, it's a resolution independent, which means if I create an object or an illustration in Illustrator, I can blow it up the size of a football field or the size of a postage stamp. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have, that's what vector graphics is it doesn't have any resolution, okay? Photoshop does. It has a limit, okay? And that's your DPI, your 300 DPI and all that stuff. That's your limit, okay? And then, you know, if you're going to go really big, you know, you're going to go to a much bigger scan level. It might be 1200 DPI. I've basically never had to do that. It's always been 300. Some comic book people, they scan their work, their inks at like 600, okay? Because they just want really high resolution. And then sometimes they'll res that back down to 300 because they'll let Photoshop figure that out as opposed to letting the scanner figure it out, if that makes any sense, okay? Because Photoshop will make a better decision than some proprietary scan software. Okay, I've done that. If it's something I consider important, I'll scan it big and then reduce it down. Okay, but for print, you always want to go 300. For Illustrator, vector graphics, it doesn't matter. Okay, unless you add. Now here's the thing: if you're developing an illustration and you've got your image in there, then it's gonna, and you're mixing up Illustrator and Photoshop. You got to remember, you're still going to be having to follow those DPI rules because it's in Photoshop. Does that make sense? If it's in Photoshop, you're going to be, it can only go so big. Okay. If you're in a vector program, it can go as big as it wants, but it has to be all vector. Once I put a photo in there, anything mixed into that vector object, those are going to pixelate when it gets too big. Okay. So if I was going to do an image for the side of a building, I'd probably do it in vector if I could. Okay. And also, by the way, you guys, if you go up to like billboards, like, they're up high, right? Those things are usually pretty pixelated, but you never see them up close. So they look fine. Okay. So because I used to always wonder about that. And then at some point I saw them up close or something. I'm like, wow, they're like 72 DPI. They're just huge. You know what I mean? But you never get close to them because they're 40 feet in the air and you're just buzzing past them in a car. So it doesn't matter. It works fine. Visually, your eyes put it all together. Okay. If you got up close to them, they'd be super pixelated. Okay. Okay. Oops. But basically, it's updating from another program and you can go back and forth. That's all. Okay. Does that make sense, you guys? Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's look at one more thing, which is just a simple thing. Because we were talking about overlays and things like that with drawings. And what I like about this, let's open this. So I just grabbed this drawing, it's just a quick drawing. I'm going to take this, unlock it. I'm going to go Command U to my hue saturation. Let me get rid of this. I'm going to go, I'm just going to desaturate it. I'm going to go to my levels, darken it up a little. And then I'm going to pull, everybody does. I love tone paper. Now, look I dragged that from the desktop. See, it turned it into a smart object. See that? Right there. So I'm going to go right click, rasterize layer. I don't need a smart object for this. I'm going to put this down here. Oops. Then I'm going to go up here, go to multiply, just like we did before. And I get a nice little tone paper effect. Does that make sense? Which means now I can go in here, go to white. I'm going to reduce the opacity of it because I don't want it pure white. And I can start coming in here and start doing a nice little tone paper quick sketch here. Now the light doesn't make sense here because there's light here and here. This was just a quick class demo, that's why. And I can start getting that nice tone paper look that everybody loves. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go back here, light up this horizon. Now, another thing I can do here, and I'll give you a couple examples here in a minute. For this light to make sense, actually, where it's being lit on both sides like that, I can come in here and start putting in some of these reflections in the water. I'm going to put just a little bit of this. Probably put I'm going to trick this and put a little darker value here. Because if I put a darker value here of this coming in the water, Then I can go back to my white and I can pull this little ripple over the top of it and start to create water and start to create a very quick sketch. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so
Thank
I'm
you.
going to go here. Now, I don't know if you guys ever noticed, but they sell tone paper, especially Strathmore has a tone tan and a tone gray. Okay. Now, for me personally, I tend to use the tone gray for like if I'm doing obviously night stuff or if I'm doing, let's see. Should have one here. Like this is in a jazz club, right? So the lighting's a little cooler, right? If I'm doing it for me, like outside, you know, I'm using tone paper, right? Or if I'm doing it from life, I should say like this, right? I'm going to use
Do
tone.
you use colored pencil for
Huh?
colored pencil?
This is pen. Is the drawing done in pen, and then there's the first pass of highlight is Prismacolor, and then I also keep a paint marker or gouache, and then the specularity is that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the highlights are 2. The mistake people make is they go in with white gouache right off the bat, and you're going, okay, so everything's got specularity. It doesn't make sense. Okay, which is this, right? This is why I'll show you right here. That's what we're talking about here, where I'm using the white pencil here, and then you can see right here I zoned in on the specularity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And also there's a core shadow there, so I'm using the core right here, then the pencil, then the specularity on the spec, like here, the specularity here. You know. Anyway, that's where this technique comes from. But if I'm going to go. So then I might go, well, this light doesn't make sense because there's light here. But if I go here and go, if you notice, I always go to pastel just because they have better colors in there. I'm going to go then I'm going to go colorize my little button right here. Turn it cool. I'm going to desaturate it so it's sort of like a cool gray paper. And by the way, this is a real scan of paper. That's why it's got texture, which I just like. You could just do this with color. It'd be fine. I just like having a little texture in there. And then I'll show you one more thing. Hang on. I'm going to go Command U. I'm going to desaturate this a little bit. It's a little too saturated. And then I could come in here and start to go, okay, now I'm going to make this lighting make a little more sense. Because I can put let's say I put an artificial light source here. And it's going to bounce up on there, and maybe there's one here, and I can start to control my lighting a little bit more, and then I could even build it a little bit. This will be too much probably, but let's just try it. Probably needs to be a little redder. You know, and I could start putting some warm lights in here. And start bouncing that light around and so on, you know, and I would keep it very limited color. You know, I wouldn't put a lot of color in this because the tone paper is handling all the midtones. There's already darks in here. So all I'm doing on a midtone idea and why it's fast is I'm only putting the darks and the lights and that's it. The midtone handles all the midtones. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which is why you use this technique. Like when in my Saturday, all those plane drawings I just showed you from March Field in my Saturday class. Okay. The reason we do that is that I can do all those drawings of planes that are on my Instagram or whatever. They're probably all 10 to 15 minutes. I can do them really fast, right? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
So you could spend your time just getting like the outlines and then go back into Photoshop and then decide where you're gonna put all the whites and really play, because that seems to be the place where you usually, like if you're out in the field, making your mistakes.
Yes. And here's what's so great about it. Once you put a midtone down, it unifies the whole thing. Okay.
Yeah.
I've unified it. I've made a big value decision. Okay. Then I just go, okay, that's holding it all together now. All I got to do is go put in my shadows and my lights. And it actually helps you throw that rendering together really fast. Does that make sense?
Yes. Uh-huh. Yes, it does.
So, you know, I'm not going to put a whole lot of color in here. I'm basically going to do a value thing usually. Now, another thing that's fun to do, I just grabbed another quick drawing because I wanted something. You see this a lot with, especially with fantasy stuff. If people are doing, so here's the same process, right? That's at Marchfield. So I try to find a couple that are, here's the same process, right? Jazz band. Same process, County Museum. Same process, this is from a model, right? And again, here's another example. This is all Prisma right here. And then I dance this light over the top of it. Does that make sense? And you can do the same
Yeah.
thing in Photoshop. That's why I'm saying this, okay? So let's go here. Where is it? Let's take this guy. Now I'm going to leave this guy just this color. I'm going to unlock it. I'm going to grab this. Oops, I don't want to do that. Again, there it is, made it a smart object because I pulled it right off the desktop. Right click it, rasterize layer, pull it under this one. And I can get kind of a fun presentation if I was, you know, depending on what the subject matter is, right? Which is kind of what I was talking about with that crazy texture that I think it was Ashley made, or can't remember who it was. You know, I might use something like that, okay? Depending on what it is. I'd probably, you know, you see this type of background a lot on sort of fantasy-ish kind of stuff, right? Or if I was doing stuff that was sort of medieval, I'd give it this parchment look. Does that make sense? It's a fun presentation thing. How I used to do this, by the way, like at Imagineering, is you would go, think about what a pain in the ass this was. I would do the drawing on a piece of vellum. I would take the whole piece of vellum, I'd wad it up like I'm going to throw it away. Then I'd put it back on my desk and I'd flatten it out. Then I'd take that to the blue printer that we had an account with down the street from Imagineering, and I'd go, give me a brown line. They have blueprints, and then they have this thing called brown line. And then they would shoot a brown line of it. I'd get back what looks like parchment because I wrinkled it all up and all that stuff, and it's brownish, right? Then I'd bring that back to my office, and then I'd go in, I hit it with marker, gouache, whatever, right? Ink. And that's how I got the same effect, right? What a, you know, you had to actually involve another, you know, entity to do that, right? Now you don't have to do that anymore. And it's
Sounds like a
funny
mess.
because, what's that?
Sounds like it will be a mess after the cleanup.
Mess? What do you mean?
Like having to put all the paper down, or the what is it, the wash?
No, I took it really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, that's actually sort of where product design sketching comes in, where you sort of learn all that kind of stuff. I have a picture of it somewhere, but I don't know where it is. Anyway, and then I just come in here and start rendering, right? Light and dark. That's it, right? Now I could put some color in here. That's fine too, right? Either way, whatever you want to do. But it's a nice little, and I keep this, you know, it's just a scan of craft paper. Okay. Again, you could just take that color and do that. A lot of people do that. Then you could keep, what I would do is if I create it in Photoshop, I'd keep one that's a tan and I keep one that's a cool gray, and just, you can go right over this. It's fine. I just love having that little bit of texture in there because I like that paper, right? I have a bunch of it here. This, right? And I love that paper, by the way. I think that's what I scanned. I've been using that paper for like 20 some odd years, and they still sell it, which blows my mind. And I get it at Kelly Paper if anybody cares. Anyway, it's a really nice paper. I like it better than the Strathmore tone tan. And Strathmore has a mixed media tone tan that I consulted on, and I still like this better. Okay. I think it just works better. Oops.
You said Kelly paper?
Huh?
Kelly paper, or what was it?
I get that stuff at Kelly Paper. It's
Okay.
called Desert Storm. And there's two weights of it. One is just like a paper. And then one is what this is, which is basically a cardstock texture. I like the cardstock. And it's really nice for all this, this kind of thing. This kind of thing. Right? That's just right by here, actually. And then the other stuff. I had one here. Oh, here it is. This is a demo for my Saturday class. Whenever we go someplace, I do a demo to show them what I want them to do. This is all Vera Street. So you can see, you can dance what looks like a lot of complexity in here in 15 minutes, right? Or faster, because all this complexity back here is all bullshit. Okay. It's all indication that's designed to make it look much more complex. Okay. Because if you go in here, and it's no different digitally. Okay, that's why I'm talking about this. If you go in here, all that back there is just little indication and value. Does that make sense? So I think you have to learn how to do that, because you can't, and I've said this before, you can't be a drawer, especially if you're going to go into entertainment design, especially. You can't be a drawer, okay? And I've had people do that, where you give them an assignment, you come back 3 hours later when you need the work, and they're sitting there drawing, and you're like, they're too slow. Okay, they're way too slow. They don't understand being able to put down very clear, communicative drawings. And the reason I harp on this is because I think it's a fundamental skill that if you want to go in, especially entertainment design, you'd better have that skill, because that's your language. And if you don't have it, I don't know how you function. Okay. I never hired anybody who didn't have that skill, unless they were doing something else. You know, they were doing graphic designers, and then it doesn't matter as much. But if you want to do the conceptual stuff, for sure, you got to have that skill. Okay. Does that make sense? And you want to marry that to your draftsmanship. So you have really good, just like that PDF I gave, that PDF I gave you of Disney is like, that's it in a nutshell, pretty much. Okay. And then also look at like the way I was drawing those planes. This is important also. And we talked about this in my Saturday class. There's two styles of sketching that I focus on in there. One is very loose and illustrative, and then one is tighter and more viscom, which is a visual communication design drawing idea, right? When I go to March Field, if you notice, those sketches at March Field look different than most of my other sketches, okay? They look much more mechanical, much more clean. All the line work is much cleaner. It's just because it's a mechanical object, and I'm kind of speaking to like how I would draw that if I was trying to communicate an idea. Does that make sense? Okay, they're two different things, right? So if you look at a guy like Paul Felix, he's drawing very illustrative, but it's also very clear. But when he's drawing the kind of stuff he draws, it has to be also illustrative. It has to be clear and illustrative. It can't just be viscom, because it's just going to be too rigid, okay? It's just going to be too rigid, all right? Okay, that's clear as hell, but it's also got charm. Does that make sense? So you're sort of combining really clear ideas like that. That's got a lot of style, okay? To me, viscom it can get a little non-stylish because it's designed to just communicate, right? It comes out of industrial design sketching, which is a different thing, okay? Look at this, all this indication stuff. I mean, this guy's, he's a monster. That's beautiful stuff. And you can see he goes around technology, very organic foliage environments, character. I mean, he's all over the place, man. Look at that. Here's the studies of how the foliage should work, his breakdowns of the design, right? Look at that. And he's just got a million great things. You know, here's some color work, limited color work, all this cool stuff, limited color work. Here's his thumbnails. It's really nice stuff. Anyway, that's what I mean by the difference between viscom and then more illustrative drawing, okay? But he's combining both, okay?
Mike, you know, when you're talking about the difference between Illustrator and Photoshop, and if you're not that concerned about the vector part of it, would you say it's easier to work on Photoshop like what you just showed us?
For which one?
For like the Paul Felix, like where it's more like a
Oh, Paul Felix, that stuff, number one, everything I just showed you is on, most of it is on paper.
okay. Okay.
But if you're going to do that kind of work, that's Photoshop. I mean, if you're going to draw it in the computer, that's Photoshop.
Right. So if you're actually doing hand drawings and then you want to adjust them like you just showed us with the sketches and the brown town, it's easier in Photoshop than doing that in
Yeah,
Illustrator.
if you're going to do freehand sketching digitally, that's Photoshop. 100%. Okay. You can freehand sketch in Illustrator, but it's a whole different thing. It's just not going to have that. It's not going to at all look like a traditional drawing. It's going to be, it's not what it's made for. It's really a very shapy program that's made. And also, by the way, the reason I push Illustrator partly is because for people who are going to do like character props, anything that's going to be very finished with ink work and all that, inked, I do that in Illustrator 100%. Okay. Because I've got ultra control over that line. I can completely manipulate it over and over again. I can get all the thin thicks like exactly perfect, all that kind of stuff. And if I'm doing like turnarounds, like for me, when I was working, if I was doing turnarounds that were going to go to the factory or going to go to a sculptor, I did all that in Illustrator. Okay. Because I could really put all that information in there. It was endlessly editable. If the sculptor came back to me and goes, there's when you turn that sideways, that little part right there, I can just go in and tweak it. I can tweak the line work endlessly if I'm doing like an inked illustration. It gives me ultra control in a different area than Photoshop. Photoshop to me depends on how you're using it, but probably for most people in this room, if you're doing image creation, it's going to be a drawing and painting program, probably. Okay, that's Photoshop. All right, guys, I'll get this up as quick as I can. Like I'm going to do it right now.
Thank you, Mike. See you
You
Monday.
Monday.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Mike.